Thanks for coming. This is the editors panel. It's always the most chill panel at Comic-Con, I like to say. We don't really run by any type of rules, which is hilarious because we're all a bunch of editors. But we kind of take it that people here are more interested in the creative process and not necessarily just hearing what stars want to talk about and all that. I'm gonna let these guys run down who they are, what their credits are. A lot of you guys are regulars, so that's awesome to see. So go ahead, you want to start out, Matt?
Yeah, my name is Matt Hawkins. I'm the president and publisher of Top Cow. I've been in the industry for 27 years. I think I've written about 300 books, most notably probably Think Tank, Postal, The Tithe, Aphrodite 9, and a lot of other shit. Oh, kids, sorry.
My name is Shannon Denton. I was an editor at Wildstorm DC Comics. Done a lot of freelance editing for IDW and Image over the years, and welcome to Comic-Con, all of you, if it's your first time.
Yep. I'm Vince Hernandez. I started at Top Cow Image, worked for Matt. I've also worked in different entertainment companies, MTV and Fox, and then I pivoted over to Aspen Comics, and I've been there for 15 years as the editor-in-chief.
My name is Kris Simon. I was an editor for Image Comics. I've edited about 250 titles for them. Currently editing an anthology called Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, Volume 2.
It is hard to spell.
It is hard to spell, yeah.
I had to look it up a couple times, I'm not gonna lie.
I'll let Barbara take care of.
Hey, if you guys could talk to the tech guys, none of these mics are coming on. The one on the podium is on, but none of these are live. Are they? I'm totally lying.
Yeah, it works. Mine works, right? We're all good?
Okay.
I'm missing you like.
I turned it up a little. If you guys want to just speak in a little closer, but we've turned it up, so you should be okay.
Awesome.
They were.
Thank you.
You're next.
Am I next? Hi, I'm Barbara Randall Kesel. I started out at DC, then I went to Dark Horse, then I went to Crossgen, and now I'm at a company called Earth Entertainment, where I'm the creative director of a new company you haven't heard of yet and won't until next year. And I have managed to freelance for a whole bunch of other companies beyond that, so I know a lot about editorial styles at different places.
And I'm Gabe Carrasco. I'm definitely the newest face on this panel. I've been in editorial for 5 years. I'm the managing editor at Aspen Comics under Vince over there. I've written one book so far, Portal Bound, for Aspen Comics. And yeah, I've been working, like I said, for 5 years.
We're giving Gabe a hard time because he also made the graphic for this panel and his name popped up on top. But I'll take the blame for that because he was the first name I remember. We're all so like veteran-y on this panel that to us it really doesn't, we don't really give a crap about that type of stuff. But I thought it was funny. Yeah. So we're going to give you a hard time about that. I could.
Vince, wasn't he alphabetical? Wasn't he at least editorially correct?
No, actually, it was not. It was anything but because I think I misspelled your name on the first pass, and then I didn't catch it until was it Shannon? Or was it somebody else? It was you. It was Barbara recognized her own name. Misspelled wrong.
We fixed it eventually.
We did. I was really pleased to see.
But it just goes to show you lesson number one: editors
Misspell names.
Yeah. Well, I always get that like as a writer, and Matt, and you guys might get this too, but people just assume you know every word in the English dictionary where they hold you to that, which
Very important.
Yeah.
I once had to practically arm wrestle an editor about the word sidle, which is not the word same as the word slide, and they kept trying to change it to slide, and they said, no, it's sidle. Have you ever lived in the West? That's what a horse does.
Well, I have a question for a few guys on the panel before I'll open it up to anybody who might have a question over here. We're going to kind of just do this real loose, so if you guys have any questions you want to just shoot on over to them. But first, so I'm looking at this panel, and we've been doing this now for a lot of years. But Matt, Shannon, Kris, you guys have also done other stuff beyond just editing. So you want to fill me in, is this something that you guys still do in your day-to-day? And is that something that you guys still even approach? Because I know, Matt, you're kind of doing all kinds of stuff now. Is the editing even still part of your day-to-day? Is that something that you would like to do?
I have never liked editing. And I don't like being edited. But they're requirements, and they're very important, and no one likes getting notes. They don't. But they're pivotal. And I would say if you're a writer or an artist, you're going to get notes. My suggestion is that you read them, stick them in a drawer, and get over your madness over the course of the next 24 hours, and then pull them back out and then make the changes. But editorial work is not something I ever wanted to do.
It's not rewarding in a career sense, and I don't mean to distract you guys from wanting to be an editor.
You guys are doing it wrong.
No, honestly,
awesome.
I don't think though. I think if you're a really true editor, you're not supposed to really enjoy the process. You want to really make the book the strongest you possibly can be. And a lot of times that's not enjoyable. To me,
It is enjoyable. You're helping to pull together a team. You're helping to take the flash off the edge of the mold. You're helping to craft this thing and bring it to life.
See, Gabe's
You do
nodding
have
his
to
head. I'm gonna be
play-
like, no, later.
Every so often you have to play, little shepherd dog behind people and
Now
nip
you're right in
some
that
nuts.
regard.
Barbara, were you an English major?
What's that?
Were you like an English major?
No,
What was
theater.
it? Theater? No? Well, see, that's why you like everything.
Maybe.
It might be because I'm like again new to the process and everything, but editorial it's extremely satisfying for me to get all this like super talented people onto one project and hyper focus them to make the best possible version of that. I'm still like starstruck by the finished piece like in our hand of like we did this as a team. And again, I mean that might be because I've been doing it for a number of years and everything, but I absolutely love the process personally.
I
There's
used to
a
do,
joy in enticing the work out of shy people and in getting other creators to trust their own instincts and jump. I like it.
It's funny too because I always give Gabe a hard time because back in the day I used to have to like FedEx the pages to the inker and then wait for his.
So easy now.
Yeah, now it's like, oh, I scan it and I send it over, and I give him a hard time. I'm like, why isn't that page over there? You know, I used to drive that thing over. I used to have to meet Cell regular. Who you probably worked with.
Uphill both ways.
Oh, young man, I remember when we got the pages by mail 3 weeks later, and when FedEx happened, all of a sudden
We're
the
ha-
magic of we
we're
can
having
get
an
it
age out,
in 2
though.
days.
Yeah, but backpedaling a little. How many people here actually want to be an editor in comics?
Wait, go back beyond that. How many people, is there anyone who doesn't know what an editor does? Is this a title about what you have no clue?
You look like you wanted.
Okay, listen carefully, we'll clue you in over the course of time.
Oh, I thought somebody was going to answer that one.
Well,
What an editor
basically-
does. You look like you were leading into that, bro.
You're the person who sometimes initiates and sometimes just guides a project to completion. You whack people on the snout when they're going too far in a direction they can't go in the parameters of your particular company. You encourage them to actually do the work by the due date, often by crying and lying. And you check everything. You keep everybody in sync. You solve fights between different parts of the creative team. You keep things in harmony. You sometimes whack people around the head with a 2x4. But you take a project from nothing to something. There's nothing more exciting. And then you take all the blame if anything goes wrong, and you get none of the glory when it goes right.
Super fun.
Can you guys point to a project where you were just like that, where it was like, hey, I took this project from nothing and it became something that people love? Is there one particular project where you guys are like, this was the one, like, nobody believed in this, nobody thought this was going to be a hit, and I kind of championed it? Is there something you guys have?
Sure. Yeah, that was, I believe, Existence 2.0 by Nick Spencer. Yeah, nobody wanted that one.
Yeah. That was before Nick Spencer was.
How many people can hear you?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear her?
Can you hear me?
No.
Sorry.
You speak
All right.
into the mic.
It was Existence 2.0 by Nick Spencer. It was his first Image title. And Nick could not get a job to save his life in comics, and he was about to give up. And I saw it was just kind of going in the wrong direction. And typically when you get submissions, if they're not up to snuff, you just kind of you move past them. But he had submitted so often that I decided to just work with him. And I took his latest submission and on the side kind of coached him through it, changed the ending completely, did a whole bunch of rewrites with him, and then I let him submit again officially, and it got approved. And that was the start of his career.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting you say that because I think about the times that are the most gratifying to me is when I publish people for the first time. And because they're so enthusiastic, and it's nice because I feel kind of like a jaded old guy, And so my first published work was 27 years ago, So I think about that, and I'm like, you get somebody like Zach Kaplan who did that Eclipse book 2 years ago, and he was just so excited, and that enthusiasm. I like having that around because it, it makes the day go by a little faster.
He's a great writer.
Yeah, he's really good. Bueller.
On the flip side of that, always bringing in new people that are super into it is good because it keeps everything refreshing because it is a job, and even when you're loving it, still we're juggling a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things on fire, but I was in the last year of Wildstorm where I got to just hire every artist that I was a fan of when I was a kid that made me want to go into the business. And we just did these jam covers for the whole year, and it was just so fun when that stuff was rolling in because I got to work with that guy, I got to work with this guy.
Right.
So for me, that was a very full circle kind of moment in my editing.
I just want to add a corollary to that is be careful when you have to work with your heroes, because there are a lot of people that I was a big fan of that I eventually had to be their editor, and that wasn't quite as fun as I thought it would be.
No, I was gonna say, I won't wrap the person out, but I did get one of those artists hit me up 5 years after the company was gone and said, "Who do I turn this page into?"
Oh shit!
And I'm like, "That's a really good question." But I did my research on most of the rest of them, and I had a backup plan for that guy. And that guy didn't what he had a rep for, but if it had come in, I'm sure it would have looked awesome. But we didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a relationship sometimes, because you're like, I can change this person. I know I'm going to be the one that will make this artist be on time. And then 3 months later, you're like, this is like a relationship. I did not change this person. So that's my experience.
That's a good analogy.
A little bit. Barbara, I thought you were going to... What about you, Gabe? You're fresh and new.
I have so many stories I can't tell.
I would say similar to Matt's story. It's always cool because at Aspen, at least, we're kind of known to get a lot of new artists from portfolio reviews where they can kind of cut their teeth before anybody they go to other publishers. So it's really cool when you go up to bat for somebody who you're like, I know this guy's gonna like be good. I see potential in his samples. Granted, you don't know how long it took them to actually do them versus that when they're on their deadline, they're a completely different artist. It feels like sometimes. But to actually go and be able to point to like as feedback to them, do it like you did on this particular page, like point to their own work and then bring it over to like, you know, Vince, editor-in-chief, or, you know, Frank, our other boss, and actually like, oh, this looks good now. You know, like they didn't have as much faith as I did initially, but it finally comes to the point where it's going to print and it's at that level that I think we could be proud of. And the artist as well is appreciative of seeing their own stuff grow on top of it, and that's always a really good feeling.
And one thing I would say that's cool too on that is when you get 20 years from now, when you see some of those guys and they're really flourishing in their careers, a guy I can think of is Andy Park. You know, I gave Andy Park his first work, and now he is the head of cinematic art for Marvel films. Every Marvel poster you've seen for the new movies, he did. And I found that kid at San Diego Comic-Con 27 years ago. He brought me a portfolio, and he's a good kid. You know, he's not a kid; he's 45, but you know, he. He's younger than me, but anyway. And so there's countless people like in that position that over the years that we've worked with, because I started at Image Comics in '92, and there's a lot of people that came through, and you see these people grow from like, you see them a portfolio. It's like, I remember when we hired Jeff Matsuda, you know, and he's the, what is he now? Animation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Chapier, Sam Liu, they're directors for all the Warner Brothers direct to DVD, or I guess there's no DVDs anymore, right? The direct films.
DTV is what we call it.
DTV? Oh, okay. But like animation, like Batman Killing Joke, you'll see it'll be directed by Chapier or Sam Liu or one of those guys, and it's kind of fun, you know. And keeping in touch with those guys is cool. So I don't know.
I see a lot of artists as well that I know and recognize in the crowd. If I could ask any of you guys, from an artistic perspective, and like now in today's landscape, and we talk a lot about like crowdfunding and different ways to get noticed. I mean, do you guys, would you say there's any particular avenue now that you would suggest to artists that's not just necessarily come pitch to a publisher to kind of make your brand? And here you are.
Well, I was just
For artists, it's easy. Do your
Hey, if you guys can't hear, just like
Post
go
your
like
stuff
this or something,
online.
and I'll yell at them.
It's hard for
So I can't hear them.
I do feel like this is the best time ever, though, to break in. Like, there's so many opportunities between the traditional comic book publishers. There's prose book companies that are starting up graphic novel divisions. There's an internet that was not around when I started, and you can put your comics online for people to read. You can still go make zines and hand them out on the corner. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of like barriers anymore to you making your thing and somehow the rest of us becoming aware of it. So to me, it's just like such an exciting time for comics.
I'll put a damper on that because we did a counterbalance out of all these things. But the barrier to entry in comics is probably indeed the lowest it's ever been. The barrier to actually making money in comics is the highest it's ever been. So there are thousands of people making comics for free. That's great. But if you're trying to do it as a business and not just a hobby, it's actually more difficult now than it's been in a really long time. I often use the analogy that there are fewer people writing comics in the United States than that play in the NBA.
I got offered a gig at a page rate that's exactly the same as the page rate I got for my first DC story in 1981.
Yeah.
It's like it's circled back that far.
No, rates have come
And so
down.
I just said, really?
Well, it's just, yeah. No, the rates, yeah, page rates have definitely fallen. I mean, it's an interesting time, you know.
Well, especially when you see the billionaire movie industry cranking out stuff based on the material that we've done, and we're trying to get that to translate into readership.
And it doesn't work.
No.
So,
Tweets don't count, people.
But I think part of the reason it doesn't work is if you have somebody who's gone to see a movie and they walk into a comic book store, there isn't, hello, you like the comic, here's the one-off graphic novel that you can go home and read and have a story in. Instead, everything is issue 60 of 745 with no, I've seen so many modern comics lately that break all the little rules we used to have. Characters are never introduced, you don't know who their names are, you don't know what they can do, you don't know where they are, you don't have establishing shots, you have just sort of a crazy multi-line mess without any governance to it. So no one new is invited in. And the simple step of adding a story so far, either online or in the books, would invite people, allow them to sort of act like they're part of this and find a place to jump on. But we're missing a range of stuff at not little kids, but young, real new readers. You know, the kind of stories we all started off with, or most of us started off with, kind of don't exist in a lot of ways, which means we're not building a new set of readers. And as we have all these people interested in comic book material, we're not being friendly and pulling in and saying, here's a gateway drug. If you like this one, you can go back and start collecting the 650
Right.
issues of the thing you found interesting.
Right.
But there's so much push to explode and change and reinvent and rebuild that there's no there. It's all like, you know, who is it this week? I don't feel like I'm part of the club. I
Right.
don't recognize these people.
well, I think that also tailors into shifting things that are going on in the industry in that what you're talking about is more the traditional comic store direct market, and that has become I hate to say it, an almost insignificant part of the industry.
True.
And, you know, webcomics are read by the millions, and most of these people don't make money on them, but the ones that do, the new model to break into comics today is you do a webcomic for a while, you build a following, you do a Kickstarter, you're in the business. You know, I mean, that's I've seen thousands of people do that in the last few years. Publishers like myself, I go through and look at those Kickstarters, and I look at the ones, and half the people I've never even heard of. And every single time, it's somebody that put up a free webcomic, two pages a week, on whatever platform. There's thousands of these platforms, or you just put it up on your own site. I always recommend, if you're interested in that, put it up on an existing platform. If you put it up on your Facebook or on your website, it becomes a destination that people won't go to. You know, you need to go where people go, not try to get people to go to you, because there's just too much content out there. And people need to stumble across it, find it, realize they need it, subscribe to it online, Webtoon, Graphite, there's a million of these things. You know, you just Google webcomics and you'll see so many portals. But there's thousands of these things that are done, and most of them barely get looked at. But there are some that get good readerships, good followings, and it's amazing. And I think the biggest thing I would suggest if you're looking into this as a career is do something different. No one needs the 6,000th version of Batman.
Marina Tegelmeyer. I have no idea her name, but that is a
I'm glad you said it
huge
first.
force.
I was gonna-
That is, if you take most like third graders now and say
Yeah.
what kind of comics have you read, they've probably read those or run across them in what's the Dog Boy,
Dogman.
Captain
Yeah.
Underpants, etc.
Dave
like
Pilkey.
that. That you have.
I don't even know what you guys just said. What'd you say?
See, this is
Dog pants, boy, what?
Dog
all
boy.
that kind of stuff.
But that's one
But
of the things
we
that
have a
I
whole
got you.
emerging field. We have a
Yeah.
whole emerging, I don't want to call it genre really, but subset and approach that isn't in any way reflected in real world comic markets. We're starting to see some of the big publishers expand into more kid-friendly materials, but again, we want to get into that habit of reading,
Right.
and then they're going to explore and find everything on Webtoons and everywhere
Yeah.
else.
the other thing too is I feel like we're at this transition period where maybe that's now the real world comic market, and we're
Well, look at
going
the
to have
numbers.
to. Yeah. So when you look at the numbers, they're doing okay. And so what we have to do is how to figure out to go, well, if you like this, you like this. But right now, they're almost two separate industries when really we should all be
Right.
people who love comics, making comics, passing our comics
Yeah.
around to each other.
It's a grandly expansive medium that's going into different forms of media and being interpreted in different ways. And we're going to see more of an explosion of that, which means any particular practitioner has to work harder to be noticed in that sea of material.
Right. You know, the largest growth I've seen in the business in the last decade is 24 to 34-year-old women who were reading Tokyo Pop manga 15, 20 years ago and grew up, and they became a little more sophisticated, a little more mature, and wanted more content. And there's books like Sunstone that we do that if you told me 20 years ago that Sunstone would be our top-selling book by like a factor of 10, I would have laughed at you. Seriously, I would have laughed at you. And now I look at this and we have a category of books. I wrote a romance comic, and I can't believe I did that, but it's that shit's hard to write. No, I have a newfound respect for those authors because that is really difficult to write, you know, and I always kind of look down my nose at it. Seriously, I did, and now I'm like, wow, this is hard, because, you know, you have dragons dogfighting spaceships like in my Aphrodite 9 book. That's easy to make visually interesting, really easy, you know, but you have a couple fighting at a table over some factor that's a climax in the storyline. How do you make that visually interesting? You know, it's really hard. And the thing that we've learned with a lot of the romance stuff is we use mainly female artists. That's helped a lot. And like when I was writing the book, I co-wrote it with the artist, and I had a lot of input. And I did 11 drafts of that first thing before I figured it out. And it was really difficult. And it's now my best-selling book I do. And that, to me, is kind of insane. So, I don't know. Anyway.
What was your process to write a romance novel? Light the candles and
mood music, you know.
Back in the day, when we did the TSR comics, when we did the line of what we're going to do, I said, Dragonlance will be our #1, and we're going to follow the model of what they do in the novels, which means we're going to get a girl readership on this book. We're going to follow the same sort of, uber soap opera under fantasy format, and play up the same characters and the same stuff there. And at the time, we only had letters to go by with who our readership was.
Right.
And we went from one letter from a woman in 100 letters that came in to 50-50. And they didn't believe it. And I said, we have TSR's numbers, we have TSR's material, we have TSR's characters. Why? And we did things that were appealing to the same demographic the same way.
Right.
In that category, women are huge readers of fantasy, huge readers of science fiction, things like that. Women tend to be drawn towards things that explore relationships. Men tend to be drawn towards things that explode. Everyone is interested in both, but as I used to say, how do you get girls to read the comic? Things still explode, but then the people care about what happened to everybody else.
Right. Well, also you got to make the comics and make them available to places where women will go, and most women, at least not until recently, would not go in a comic book store. So if you look at Sunstone, we're selling 70 to 80% of the volume on Amazon.
But you also have the sexy underlay to that draws in a visual audience too, that doesn't necessarily care about the story. I mean, I love the stuff; it's wonderful.
Right.
But it's more than just a romance story.
No, I know it's titillating.
And women will see through you. If you're not doing stuff with sincerity and you're not committing to your characters, they will smell it a mile off and desert you in waves. If you are trying to reach them, again, I'm generalizing, you'll find individuals who differ. But for the most part, if you can feel that somebody is trying to entertain you, reach you, hear you, see you, you meet them more than halfway.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have editors that are female, and my sister is a writer, so I would do this stuff and send it to these people, and they would say, give me lots of notes. I mean, I literally asked for lots of notes on this because I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
You go to girls' school.
So it was a fun process, and eventually Stephanie Sage, who did Sunstone so well, him and his wife, after like the 8th draft, they kept telling me I wasn't getting it, and I was frustrating. I maybe do 2 or 3 drafts of everything else I've ever done, and I'm on the 8th or 9th draft of this thing, and he just got a little flustered with me, and he's like, "Damn it, Matt. Go watch the first 5 minute ups of Up, the Pixar movie. Watch the first 5 minutes 10 times in a row and go rewrite it." And I'm like,
the first episode of This Is Us.
Do what?
And the first episode of This Is Us.
I don't know what that is, but
don't watch the first episode of This Is Us. TV show currently on NBC. But you don't need to watch the series. You just watch the first episode, and that'll hit some of those tones for you.
Well, I did watch the first 5 minutes about 10 times, and I got it. And I wrote the next draft, and everybody told me it was great. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, sometimes it takes time to figure stuff out. I've written hundreds and hundreds of books at that point, and it was like starting over.
Well, think about it. You're working in an entirely new format. It's like going from Wagnerian opera to sort of like concert music or something like that. It's not that one is not less difficult than the other, but it's an entirely different language and expectation. And then, of course, you start getting into, if you're just looking at romance novels, you start getting into all the subsets. Most of the stuff I can't stand getting anywhere near.
Right. No, and the funny thing is I started watching rom-coms, and I watch them now, and it's kind of weird, because I kind of like them. I don't know why. So it's just, whatever.
Moral of this story, you guys watch rom-coms. Well, I think we hit a lot of notes. Do you guys want to open the floor
Yeah,
for
why not?
questions? Anybody have any questions? We'll start with you, then hit you.
Hey, I have.
Oh, we'll go the other way. No, it's all good either way. We'll get you both.
I'm a film producer and writer, and I have a question about the international output of comics. Are American companies able to collaborate with publishers abroad? And are the editors approaching this if possible, like film producers, for example, having characters that are multinational? You know, are there outputs in France, for example, where graphic novels are really popular, or in Asia? And are you guys then suggesting to the writers, why don't you have one of the 5 people being Asian?
That's a good question, and most of you couldn't hear it. The question was about multinational, international licensing and reprints, and how do you develop things with the idea of having other countries possibly in collaborations with foreign countries. I've actually done foreign licensing for Image, Top Cow, and Extreme for my entire career, and I've published books in 57 different countries, and we've done collaborations in Japan. We did the Witchblade anime with them, and that was interesting. And I've done a number of things. Like there were Witchblade French books that were published in France first, done by French artists and writers, and we actually never published them here, ever. And it was because we didn't feel like it was, and there was a Japanese Witchblade which we did republish here, but the French ones were just not really the same thing at all, and we thought it would be confusing to the brand, so we never published it here. We have a global deal now with Panini, publishes in the big 6 European languages, which is most of what it is. It's much harder to get into the Asian countries because they're much more insular with their content, and it's much more national pride almost in terms of things like I did a thing 5 years ago in Korea where I worked with a group, and it was digital. Worked with some Korean artists. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll hire artists from other countries that are well known, and that'll get the book published there because they'll know them.
Is that then an argument for people who are starting to get into this business to work with established publishers versus doing it themselves? I have the impression here also that most people that I'm meeting seem to think like what you suggested, that you should first self-publish it, but then obviously you can't do stuff like that. And the other question about this is also about the overhead. I mean, if a company like Image is ordering thousands and thousands of books, obviously they get a discount versus somebody who would do it themselves. Is the discount enormous? Like, for example, if I would like to do my own graphic novel and I'm printing only 500 copies, but I want to have the same quality, hardcover, super high quality of print.
That's a good question. I think the thing with print on demand now is better than it's ever been. So it is definitely huge economies of scale in terms of our printing deals, distribution deals, and so the answer is yes, of course, you're probably going to be better off if you get an established publisher to publish you. But the reality is most established publishers don't publish a lot of new people anymore. The mitigation of risk is harder than it's ever been. The margins are narrower than they've ever been. So you think, if I go back to the NBA analogy, the average NBA career is what, 5-10 years? I'm still competing with Kurt Busiek, Mark Wade, and guys who were writing 20 years before I started. So it's these guys are sometimes write for decades on end. But in terms of foreign translation for independent self-published comics, I have maybe seen 2 in 20 years that were done. So the answer is it doesn't happen. And the only reason why Image and what we've done is so well established internationally is because we did it in the early 90s and established a foothold in a lot of these countries, especially in Europe. And I do Frankfurt Book Fair every year, and we do Essen and Erlang and Angoulême every few years. And so we do a lot of where we go with the artists and go over there and promote it. It's very difficult now, and a lot of new content is not getting published in foreign countries. It's not, even from established publishers. It's more of the older material, and the margins, like I said, in the print runs, they are smaller than they used to be, and so everyone is a little more careful about what they do. Ultimately, and this is what I explain to people all the time. Like, I don't know anyone sitting here who publishes more than a few titles a month, right? None of us are publishing 50 titles a month. I think we
That's what I
publish.
was going to say. My question was, how many people are on staff at your company and
Well,
Vince's company? Because you're not talking people with, my question would be, does anyone have time to think of foreign publishing, or are they busy just moving pieces, back and forth? Because in my experience at most comic book companies, especially the smaller ones, everyone is wearing so many hats and doing so much work for the love of it, but just because we don't have a lot of extra money to hire a lot of extra staff.
There are maybe 5 people that I know that are specialists in international licensing from the American side, and 2 of them have quit. And so I'm one of 3 that still do it. And I negotiate those contracts all the time, and I go over there all the time. But I love traveling for free, Anyway.
Yep.
So actually what you said about how you had Witchblade Comics published in France but haven't come over here, actually as editors, do you sometimes think of yourselves like the custodians of certain characters, especially if they've been established so long? Like that's what Denny O'Neil said about being a custodian of culture for Batman and stuff. So do you feel that with especially like some of your characters that are more long existing than others?
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. And especially when you created it, that's the weirder part. Yeah, you feel a weird allegiance to your own stuff. Sometimes that's actually a negative. I found that.
Yeah, I agree 100%, because you get married to the property and the vision that you love it in, and you're so I don't say afraid, but you're so hesitant to want to ever remove yourself from that. When you guys did the Witchblade manga, or was it Witchblade anime first or manga?
The anime came out and the manga came out following.
Okay, yeah, I love that, because I was like, wow, the character got established, it was branded, it had run a good course, and at that point it was fresh to do a new take on it. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, we fight that as editors a lot, I think. Especially, you can take away the word like gatekeepers. We are the gatekeepers. I mean,
right.
I use that word a lot to Gabe. I'm like, we are the ones who are the last line of defense for us before the reader sees these characters. And if we're not loving these characters, they're never going to care about them. It has to show through in what we do and how we treat these characters with respect. Kind of what like you guys were saying about how covers, it's like, if you could see on the cover that they didn't care, they were just trying to make a buck by objectifying the character or doing something, absurd, then yeah, that's wrong. That's not how we approach the work as editors. I mean, we are the custodians of these universes and these characters, and that's a great honor. I appreciate that. I mean, I may have not created some of the characters, but yeah, a lot of the new ones that have come in are ones that we just came up with out of thin air, and they're our babies,
Yeah, you're protective of them.
Yeah.
One throwback I just thought about is just so you know, North American English comic book is about 10% of the world market. 10%. So Japanese is 30% of the world market. When we did that Japanese manga, we sold 4 million copies of that book. I don't know that we've sold 4 million copies of any other book ever.
Let's all go to the manga panel. What about you, though? You worked at Blizzard. I mean, is there an approach that you could speak on with those characters? Because, I mean, these are characters that are seen on billboards and across the world. And
Not so much there, but I was thinking about, I went to dinner last night with some writer friends. I also write Marvel cartoons, and we were talking about Spider-Man, going back to the custodian thing, and Spider-Man used to have to pay his rent, and he'd have to get that just right photo for J. Jonah Jameson, but it had to be in by 5 o'clock, but Doc Ock wasn't showing up to that part of town till 4:57. And so there was this built-in deadline time thing, and we were saying, and my son was with me, and we're talking about this newspaper stuff, and I realized as I looked over at him and he's getting bored with all these artists and writers that had grown up with this, they're not really reading newspapers. It doesn't make sense. So sometimes you have to be the custodian and go, all right, we got to change some things. How do we change it so it still feels right to this, but now we've got to come up with a different way of doing this. So you sometimes being respectful to the character means really knowing it, but then being okay with changing it versus holding it to a period in time that doesn't exist anymore. And that's a hard thing to do. You're like, I'm a fan of that, but you also want new fans to come in. Your job is to facilitate in the best possible way the character continuing to make money for the company.
yeah. And the best thing is, as editors, comic fans hate everything already anyway. So no matter what we do, they're going to hate it. So if we change Thor into a female, they're going to hate that. So we kind of, I think.
But then people buy it, and so if the numbers are showing that it's doing well, then they're going to keep doing stuff like that. So the numbers speak more than the tweets.
Exactly.
That's rule number one.
And that still applies in comics. I mean, the dollar, the bottom line, is what's going to dictate what comes next. No matter how many tweets or retweets or trending topics you see, publishers always come back to what sells. So we want to make money. We love comics, but we also have to eat. So, anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
So, if you're trying to establish yourself as a writer, like what's really gonna impress people that are gonna like publish you? Like, how are you gonna like break in?
Here's my self-published anthology of 5 stories by me, and I found 5 artists to work with to put them together in this anthology that I curated and put together, and here it is. Finished work. Good examples of finished work are the easiest way to get somebody to see what you can do and to actually notice that you're doing something, and if they like it, to follow up with you.
To me, it's all about mitigation of risk to the publisher. You know what I mean? And what that basically means is I don't want to lose money, right? And so if you have 500 Twitter followers and they're rabid, and I see that there's a lot of interaction between you and the fans, like your webcomic, whatever it is you're doing, that means a lot more to me than the person who has 100,000 fake followers they paid for, and there's zero interaction. They tweet a bunch of stuff and no one responds. Don't do that. We're not stupid. Okay, and there's a publisher now that has like 1.5 million Facebook likes, and I'm like, and I'd never heard of this publisher before, and I looked on the thing, they put 2 or 3 posts up every day, no one likes it, not a single person. I'm like, how can you have 1.5 million followers? And anyway, that's a segue, but it really is about establishing, it's a catch-22, because you're trying to break in, but I want to publish people that I can make money on, you know what I mean? So how do you prove that to me, and that's where I said the Kickstarter thing really is a plus. People that have Patreons, they even have small followings, because you can build off of a small following. People with 0 following, it's hard. I really, her anthology idea I think is a good one, but I'm at the point now where I really don't publish new writers at all. And I know that's not what you want to hear, but the few times we have done it, you lose money. It's a business.
Basically, you want to become the competition. So
yeah,
that's a good.
I'm stealing that. That's great.
We want to root you to our baseball team to go to a baseball game. I think we were on NBA earlier, so we'll mix it up. But if you're over there making money, going back to the money thing, 'cause it is a business, then it's a lot easier. We all have to either, if we're not the boss, we have to go convince a boss. And the only way to do that when the new guy is when like, that new guy's making money over there that could be going into our company. That's how you break it.
That actually become our competition is that's the best thing. I never even thought about that specifically, but that's sort of succinct. Because if I look at you as competition, then I want you to work for me. So
back in the black shirt.
So I have a question for everybody. Coming back to the role of a comics editor specifically, if we leave maybe names and comic titles out of it, does everybody have kind of an anecdote you could share about only in comics story?
Yeah, well, start on that end. I've been talking a lot. Yeah. Only in comics.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what that means. Barbara, would you mind clarifying that?
Or narrow the question just a little bit, because
I'm
a
thinking
pretty vague.
anecdotes without
Well,
names
so
and
as
titles.
a comics editor, the role may be very different than a closed book editor. So what I was wondering is if you guys could share like something you encountered without naming names or titles. So it could be a good or a bad thing where you say, this could only happen in comics.
Well, here's a generalization. If you're a prose editor, you're just looking at that object, your guidance of it, and the publishing line that you have there. When you add in the extra quality of trademark and licensing, like we talked about Spider-Man earlier, where you are protective of the character, you are representing the company to the character and the character to the company. You're trying to get the best darn story you can out of it, but you can't kill the character. You can't do anything drastic. So we have the constant illusion of real change in some kind of satisfying story. But you're talking about writing and the art all built together. You have so many moving parts involved there, and any one of them can fail completely. So if you have a prose book, you just have those words building up that fake experience, and it succeeds or fails. But when you start adding the art in, you can go to whole new places where you can have crazy stuff show up in the art that you didn't even know was there that can come back to bite you in very interesting ways. So, but
the very interesting way is what I was getting at. Has that happened to you?
Batman 401, I want to say the Magpie story that Trevor Von Eaton drew that I wrote. I did a phone interview back in the days before the internet with a college class, and I'm going through the story. You know, I know the script, we all know the art, we all know the character in-house there. So I had one of the students say, "Is that supposed to be an oral sex scene?" The panel shows Batman and Magpie with their head in front of him. The script describes it one way. The art was interpreted as seeing it a different way. It went through an editor, it went through a proofreading department, it went through the people who check things for licensing, it went through everybody else who gets to read everything that comes through every month. No one ever noticed that we had a very awkwardly drawn panel there that could easily be interpreted that way. Never asked Trevor if he did it on purpose, by the way. So you have, as I said, the art can send you to places that you didn't necessarily intend to go. And if you did intend to go there, you better go big or go home.
And I think that's the beauty of comics in general, is there is no one situation that you can apply to every specific scenario, I think. Because every artist is different, every creator is different. And I think being a good editor is about approaching each situation with that in mind. Because like Matt said, I mean, he's been doing this 20 years, I've been doing this 20 years. You're going to run into every situation under the sun, but it's kind of how you adapt as an editor, how you're able to do it. I don't look at editing at all like I think a lot of people out in the crowds or out there think of it. When you think of an editor, you think of somebody just sitting there proofreading with a highlighter. That's nothing like what a comic book editor does. We're much more like, I would say, like almost like a hybrid producer / director of a film, where we bring in the talent, we coordinate the story, we make sure everybody hits their deadlines, we coordinate the printing of the book. I mean, even after the book, we're still marketing this thing. I mean, you want to hear only in comics? Only in comics will one person do 17 different jobs and get paid for one job.
That's true.
I
support that, yeah.
I have a database at home, the job of comic book editor, the job description, based on the little check marks for everything anyone who's ever had the title of editor has told me they've been asked to do. And it's big.
This might not be an only in comics thing, but I love this story. It's only in comics have I been told that I'm writing characters that I created and I'm the only one that's ever written them is writing them wrong. I don't know if that happens to novelists or screenwriters or anything, but usually in those other mediums, it's not the same people that do it continuously. Like there's books I've written for a decade, and people said, "Oh, that character wouldn't do that." I'm like, "What?" And I never argue with anyone anymore. I kind of nod my head. And it's part of the next issue, and they do, so I don't care.
Something I can say that I can throw out real quick, just for those of you that are going to make your own books. The writer is supposed to do the sound effects, so if you haven't worked in comics, that's not a letterer's job. This is just a common note I give to very talented people that are writers of very famous TV shows and movies you've seen, but coming into comics, that's one misconception that that's taken care of. Because if it's not there, if it's not in your script, the letterer is not going to just start inserting sound effects for you. That's not what they do. So.
And comics are not just a screenplay with pictures.
Yeah, and also don't put 15 actions into one panel, because as the artist, I can't draw the guy throwing the baseball, it bouncing off the wall, him catching it. Yeah.
It's even nodding.
Yeah.
When you have the character nods.
Yeah.
Well, Rob Liefeld, right? You can do that.
Yeah, you can pull it up. But you know, the thing is, I think one of the unique things about the comic medium is the visual language of the time that takes place between the panels. You know, and that's something that is so vitally important. And I was talking to this guy this morning, a psychology major who's doing his PhD on comic book studies, and he's talking about how people under the age of 5 don't distinguish that they think that the characters on the panels that are separate are not the same character, even though that we look at them as adults and say that's obviously the same character, and that's a learned thing, and it's based, a lot of that's based on nationality and what is learned in their things. I had a really fascinating discussion, but the best book I've ever read on explaining the visual language of comics is Will Eisner's Comics and Sequential Artwork. There's plenty of other ones, Understanding Comics, but Will Eisner's book is really the Bible. It will show you the visual language of how to use the panels, because so much of what is in a comic is in your head. You know what I mean? And it really is about action and reaction. And you see actions all the time in comics, especially a lot of indie comics that don't have editors. I see a lot of actions, but there's no reaction. You know what I mean? You punch the guy, and he's just still standing there. Like normally you would see him flying back, or there's some sort of action and reaction. And really storytelling in every medium is all really about setup and payoff. You know, and one of the things about editors that I think is good, because I do both, and all the time I write, I set stuff up and I forget to pay it off. And then someone will read it and say, "Hey, what'd you do with this thread?" I'm like, "Oh, shit, sorry." So it's good to have someone else, no matter how long you've read your book, how long you've been writing all these things, it's really good to have an editor. You know, I always make sure, I have different people I trust. Like I have people that I get to read and proof my outlines, and I have people that I get to read and proof my dialogue, and they're not the same people. And I do that by choice because I have that luxury, but it's important.
So yeah, like one last question.
Touching on bringing in new talent, you've got more people doing Kickstarters and coming in that way. You also have a lot of people coming in from screenwriting backgrounds. In some cases, maybe the Kickstarter people didn't have an editor for their book. They acted as their own editor. Same with the screenwriter. What has been different with some of these new voices coming in, dealing with them versus in the past when those weren't necessarily the routes coming in? Are you having more trouble getting them to listen to your changes or suggestions for the books rather than...
I've had young writers say to me, I don't have to know how to spell or know grammar. That's the proofreader's job. My job is to come up with the story. And I said, well, if you're working with me, go back to 5th grade, learn basic English grammar and spelling, because if you look like an illiterate monster in your script, I don't want to work with you anymore. I don't care how good the idea is. You're disrespecting the basic tools of writing. That's me.
Yeah, that was a great point. I also think it goes back to what Matt said. I think it's the other way around. I think because there's so many new talents that can easily make a comic, I think the pool's been diluted, and I think it's on us now to kind of filter through a lot more people that aren't good, you know, or just aren't on the level. Back then, I mean, to make a comic or to be a comic creator, you had to bust your ass, and you had to get out there and be a comic book creator and come to conventions when it wasn't fun. Nowadays, anybody can just get online and be a creator. Well, that's great, but for us, it just makes the job harder, I think, to sift through a lot of this kind of trash, you know. And then there's always good creators out there, but you know, it's harder to prove yourself, I think.
And one thing I suggest to a lot of, whenever someone is come from that indie field or that where they're like a one-person crew, I usually will set the expectation up front, because at that point I'm usually paying them to do something, and I say, look, I'm paying you to do this. You need to do X, Y, and Z, or I'm not going to pay you. You know, and so I set that expectation early on. And one thing I'd say for a lot of you, if you want to learn to self-edit your own writing, read it out loud. You'd be shocked at how stupid stuff sounds when you read it to yourself. Because you read it on the page and you're like, it looks fine. You read it out loud, it's like, oh, that sounds stupid. You know, and that happens to me every day.
It's funny because I consider but it's funny because I consider myself a little bit of a writing douche. But I read that on one of your Facebook posts, well, like years ago, where you're like, I read my stuff out loud to myself, and sometimes it sounds stupid. And I was like, wow, that's pretty smart. I never thought about reading it out loud like that. And I'll admit to using that sometimes now. And I think of Matt too. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking out loud, man. That little Matt Hawkins technique. Nah. But no, it does help.
Yeah. It works. Absolutely works.
Absolutely a useful tool, but the only downside to that is we are talking about written language as opposed to spoken language. So sometimes when you speak something, you put in an inflection that you have to artificially create a way to put into the comic to have the meaning come through. Or sometimes we have language that's just a little bit more stylized than the way you would actually say it out loud. And that's the biggest difference. We were talking about screenplays to comics before. Screenplays generally have language that's a little bit bland because an actor's going to inhabit it. You can't do that in a comic because there's no actor. So you kind of have to make sure it's strong in there. But yes,
good point.
Readable.
I guess we are out of time. My phone is dead, but they gave me the signal a while back. So
we're done.
Yeah, we're out of time. Can we give everybody a round of applause for that? Thank you. And thanks for coming, guys.